The school was supposed to be empty. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer said the words into his radio, but the frozen German shepherd at the front door told a different story. Snow moved sideways across the parking lot of North Ridge Elementary, driven by wind that had dropped the temperature to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Daniel had almost passed the building when his headlights caught a dark shape beneath the entrance canopy. At first, he thought it was a fallen branch. Then the shape moved. The dog rose on stiff legs and struck the glass door with both front paws. Once, twice, 3 times. Daniel stopped the rescue truck and stepped into the storm. Cold air pressed through his yellow jacket before he reached the sidewalk. "Easy boy," he called. "Come away from the door." The German shepherd turned toward him. Snow covered his sable back and the deep black saddle between his shoulders. His amber eyes looked tired, but they were not confused. A faded red rescue collar circled his neck. Daniel recognized it before he recognized the dog. Ranger. The name came back with the force of an old memory. 5 years earlier, Ranger had stood beside Gunnery Sergeant Aaron Bennett in a Marine search and rescue photograph Daniel kept hidden inside the glove compartment of his truck. Daniel had not seen the K-9 since Aaron's funeral. Ranger looked at him for one silent second, then returned to the door and scratched again. Daniel approached slowly and held out a thermal blanket. The dog refused it. He offered water from a collapsible bowl. Ranger did not lower his head. He kept one paw against the glass and stared into the dark hallway beyond it. The building was cleared at 4:20, Daniel said, more to himself than to the dog. Every student had supposedly gone home before the storm closed the mountain roads. The evacuation list had been checked twice. The lights were off. No movement showed through the windows. Still, Ranger would not leave. Daniel crouched near the entrance. Ice clung to the fur around the dog's legs, and his breathing came in thin white clouds. The German shepherd lowered his head, opened his mouth, and placed a plastic card in the snow between them. Daniel picked it up with a gloved hand. It was a school library card, scratched and damp, but still readable beneath the parking lot light. Caleb Bennett. Daniel stopped moving. Aaron's son. The boy Daniel had avoided meeting for 5 years because he did not know how to stand before a child whose father had not come home. Ranger touched the card with his nose, then looked back at the door. Daniel pressed his flashlight against the glass. The beam moved across empty lockers, paper snowflakes, and a hallway covered in shadows. Nothing moved. Then, far inside the school, something struck metal 3 times. Faint, measured, deliberate. Ranger answered with 3 sharp scratches against the glass. Daniel felt the old rescue instinct rise beneath the guilt he had carried for years. He reached for his radio. "Chief Hayes, this is Mercer at North Ridge Elementary. The evacuation status may be wrong. I have a Marine K-9 signaling at the main entrance and a student identification card belonging to Caleb Bennett." Static filled the speaker. Ranger stood beside him, shivering but alert. Daniel looked at the locked door, then at the name in his hand. The school was supposed to be empty. Someone inside had just answered the dog. 3 hours earlier, Daniel Mercer had stood beneath the fluorescent lights of the Silver Creek Rescue Garage, checking cold weather equipment while snow gathered against the bay doors. The storm had arrived faster than the county forecast predicted, closing 2 mountain roads and cutting power to several neighborhoods before sunset. Daniel moved through the preparations with the calm precision of someone who trusted lists more than memories. He inspected thermal blankets, portable heaters, flashlights, medical kits, and the reinforced ropes used for winter searches. Each item went into the rescue truck in the same order. Routine kept his hand steady. Chief Laura Hayes entered carrying a clipboard covered with road closures and evacuation reports. At 48, she had spent enough winters in Colorado to know that silence during a storm could be more dangerous than noise. "North Ridge Elementary is marked clear," she said. "The final bus is left at 4:20. I need you to check the exterior, confirm the doors are secure, and look for frozen pipes or damaged windows." Daniel glanced at the school name. His hand stopped above the equipment drawer for less than a second. Laura noticed. She noticed most things. "You know someone there?" she asked. "Not anymore," Daniel answered. He closed the drawer and lifted a case of emergency flares into the truck. Inside the glove compartment rested a faded photograph he had carried through 5 years of silence. Gunnery Sergeant Aaron Bennett stood in the center wearing winter training gear, one hand resting on the shoulders of a younger German shepherd. Ranger's ears were high, his red rescue collar still bright. Daniel stood beside them, smiling toward the camera as snow fell around the unit. Aaron had been the kind of Marine who remembered birthdays, called families after long deployments, and carried extra coffee for anyone on the night watch. He had also been Daniel's closest friend. After Aaron failed to return from their final assignment together, Daniel attended the funeral but left before meeting Aaron's son. Caleb had been 5 years old then. Daniel had seen him only from the back, holding his mother's hand beneath a gray church awning. Every year afterward, Daniel told himself he would visit when the grief was less raw. Every year, the distance grew heavier. He placed the photograph face down beneath a pair of work gloves and shut the compartment. Outside, wind pressed snow against the garage windows. Laura handed him a radio and a printed map. Cell service is failing north of town. Check in every 15 minutes. Understood. And Daniel, she added, a cleared building is still a building worth checking. He met her eyes and nodded. The rescue truck left Silver Creek just after 9 o'clock, moving carefully through streets washed pale beneath the storm. Daniel checked dark houses, helped an elderly couple restart a portable heater, and cleared a fallen branch from a narrow road. North Ridge waited at the edge of his route, silent beneath the snow. The digital evacuation record showed every child accounted for. The exterior cameras had stopped transmitting after the power failure. Nothing in the official report suggested danger. Still, as Daniel turned toward the school, an old uneasiness settled beneath his ribs. He opened the glove compartment at a red light and looked once at Aaron, Ranger, and the man he had been before guilt taught him how to disappear. Then he closed it again and drove toward the darkened building, unaware that one name from the photograph was already waiting for him at the door. Static cracked through Daniel's radio before Chief Laura Hayes answered. Mercer, repeat your last transmission. Daniel kept his eyes on Ranger while the wind drove snow beneath the entrance canopy. Possible occupants inside North Ridge Elementary. I found Caleb Bennett's library card outside the main doors. Ranger is signaling toward the building, and I heard 3 impacts from somewhere inside. A pause followed. Daniel could picture Laura checking the evacuation record again. The school system shows a complete evacuation, she said. Every student was marked off campus by 4:20. Ranger scratched the glass once more. Daniel aimed his flashlight through the door and watched the beam slide across the dark hallway. The dog disagrees. He placed the library card inside his jacket and crouched beside the German Shepherd. Up close, Ranger looked exhausted but alert. Ice had formed around the longer fur near his legs, and his breathing came quickly through a layer of white vapor. Daniel unfolded the thermal blanket and tried to place it over the dog's back. Ranger stepped away, then pressed his nose against the narrow seam between the doors. He was not refusing warmth. He was refusing delay. All right, Daniel whispered. Show me what I am missing. He examined the faded red collar. A strand of yellow wool was tangled near the metal tag, the same bright color used for emergency blankets in the school district. Fine white dust clung to Ranger's shoulders and chest. Daniel rubbed a little between his gloved fingers. Fiberglass insulation. The dog had not come from a nearby house or wandered in from the road. He had been inside the building. Somehow, he had found a way out. Ranger moved toward the east side of the entrance, then back to the locked door, tracing the same short path as though showing Daniel where the journey had ended. Chief, I have insulation fibers on the dog and school-issued blanket material caught in his collar. He likely exited through a maintenance space. Laura's voice sharpened. Understood. I am dispatching a second rescue unit and contacting the principal. Do not enter alone unless you have a confirmed life hazard. Daniel looked through the glass again. Nothing moved. The hallway remained black and still. Then came the sound. 3 faint knocks. A pause. 3 more. Ranger rose despite the cold and answered with 3 firm scratches. Daniel felt every rule in his training arrange itself around one simple truth. A record could be wrong. A frightened child could be too weak to shout. A dog could notice what an entire system had missed. He moved to the emergency access panel beside the entrance and removed the metal cover with a rescue tool. The backup lock had no power, but the manual release remained intact. Daniel pulled it, and the right door opened less than an inch before stopping against pressure from the frozen frame. He worked the gap wider, careful not to damage the glass. Cold air rolled out from the school. It should have been warmer inside. It was not. The building smelled of floor wax, paper, and metal gone cold. Daniel secured a full-body rescue harness around Ranger, clipped a tracking line to the reinforced ring, and fitted a lightweight thermal cover across the dog's back. This time, Ranger accepted it. He had what he needed now. An open door. Daniel reported his entry point and activated the location beacon on his vest. Mercer entering through the main entrance with Ranger. Possible victims deeper inside. Maintain radio contact. Copy, Laura replied. Second unit is 8 minutes out. Daniel switched on his shoulder light and stepped into the hallway. Ranger entered beside him, paws quiet against the tile. They passed rows of dark lockers and paper snowflakes taped to classroom doors. Near the first intersection, the German shepherd lowered his nose, found a scent, and turned sharply toward the lower library wing. On the floor ahead lay a child's mitten, a hearing aid, and 5 paper cups arranged near an overturned cart. Daniel touched the radio at his shoulder. Chief, I have signs of multiple occupants. Somewhere below, a small voice carried through the frozen building. Ranger. The German shepherd pulled toward the stairwell, and Daniel followed. The stairwell descended into a darkness that swallowed the beam from Daniel's shoulder light after 20 feet. Ranger moved ahead with his nose low, the tracking line loose between them, following a scent that seemed stronger with every step. The temperature dropped as they reached the lower level. Daniel could feel the cold through his gloves when he touched the metal handrail. Somewhere beneath the floor, a pipe knocked once and fell silent. Ranger, the small voice called again. This time it came from beyond the fire door at the end of the corridor. The German shepherd pulled toward it, then stopped and looked back at Daniel. I hear you, Daniel called. My name is Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer. Rescue is here. A woman answered from the other side. Her voice was controlled, but weak with exhaustion. There are 6 of us. 5 children and 1 teacher. Daniel reached the fire door and tested the handle. It moved less than an inch. The frame had contracted in the cold, and pressure from something on the other side held it tight. He examined the hinges, then spoke into his radio. Chief Hayes, I have confirmed 6 occupants in the lower library wing. Fire door is jammed. Interior temperature is near freezing. Request entry tools and portable heat at the east service access. Laura answered immediately. Copy. Second unit is 3 minutes out. Can you establish voice contact? Affirmative. Daniel knelt beside the bottom edge of the door. A narrow line of air moved beneath it, carrying the scent of dust, paper, and damp wool. Ranger lowered himself beside Daniel and pressed his nose to the gap. A child began to cry softly on the other side. The dog answered with a low, steady whine. The crying stopped. Ranger is here, Daniel said. He found me. I knew he would, the woman replied. I am Hannah Brooks. We are in the reading room. One child is very cold and barely speaking. Daniel looked at the door again. Keep everyone together. Move them away from any windows. Use rugs, curtains, coats, anything that holds warmth. Help is close. He removed a compact pry tool from his pack and worked it into the upper seam. The door resisted. He shifted to the lower hinge side, applying slow pressure so the frame would not twist. Metal groaned, but the opening widened only slightly. Ranger suddenly turned away and trotted toward a recessed maintenance panel beside the corridor. White insulation dust covered the edge. Daniel remembered the fibers on the dog's coat. You came through there, he whispered. The panel opened into a narrow service passage running behind the library wall. It was too small for an adult to crawl through safely, but Ranger could fit. Daniel unclipped the tracking line and attached a small light to the dog's harness. Go to them. Ranger entered without hesitation. His light disappeared around the first bend. Seconds later, children's voices rose beyond the wall. Not loud, not strong, but hopeful. Daniel returned to the fire door. Hannah, Ranger is with you now. Through the thin opening, he heard the German shepherd's paws crossing carpet, followed by a child whispering his name. Daniel placed the pry tool deeper into the seam just as new lights appeared at the far end of the corridor. Chief Hayes and 2 rescuers arrived carrying hydraulic tools, thermal blankets, and a portable heater. Laura knelt beside him. What do we have? Daniel looked through the narrow gap. Beyond it, Ranger lay against a small girl wrapped in a yellow blanket, while 4 other children and Hannah huddled close together. Around Caleb Bennett's neck hung a worn marine dog tag. Daniel recognized Aaron's name before the boy lifted his eyes. We have 6 people alive, Daniel said quietly, and one of them has been waiting 5 years for me to walk through this door. Chief Hayes positioned the portable heater near the doorway while the 2 rescuers prepared the hydraulic spreader. Daniel remained beside the narrow gap, speaking to Hannah and the children so they would know what every sound meant before it happened. The door may move suddenly, he said. Stay close to the far wall and keep Ranger with the youngest child. On the other side, Hannah answered, we are ready. Metal pressed against metal. The frame groaned once, then again, but the door held. Daniel looked through the opening and saw the reading room more clearly. Curtains had been pulled from the windows and wrapped around the children. Foam exercise mats covered part of the cold floor. 5 paper cups sat near an empty water pitcher. Hannah had turned every ordinary object into something that could preserve warmth. Ranger lay against a small girl beneath the yellow blanket, his sable body curved around her side. Her eyes were open now. One hand rested in the fur at his neck. Caleb sat beside them wearing a winter coat that was too large for him, Aaron's dog tag visible above the zipper. He met Daniel's gaze through the gap without looking away. Chief, Daniel said quietly, we need to understand how they were missed. Laura checked the digital roster on her tablet. The system still shows all 5 students boarded the special transportation bus at 4:20. Hannah heard her through the door. The bus never arrived. Her voice carried fatigue, but no anger. The road closed before it reached us. I called the front office, but the power failed while they were confirming another pickup. Why were the children marked as gone? Laura asked. The attendance program updated automatically when the dismissal schedule ended, Hannah replied. Someone must have assumed the bus had completed the route. Daniel looked at the children. A green mark on a computer screen had erased them from everyone's concern. Only Ranger had refused to accept it. The hydraulic tool opened the gap another inch. Warm air from the portable heater began moving through the doorway, but it would take time to raise the temperature. Daniel passed thermal packs through the opening one by one. Caleb collected them and placed them inside blankets around the smaller children. He moved carefully, imitating instructions with the seriousness of someone older than 10. The little girl with Ranger, Daniel said. What is her name? Emily Carter, Hannah answered. She is 8. She stopped shivering a few minutes before Ranger came back. Daniel knew that could be a dangerous sign. Keep her awake. Ask simple questions. Do not rub her arms or legs. Let the heat build slowly. Caleb leaned closer to Emily. Tell me your favorite animal. The girl whispered something Daniel could not hear. Caleb smiled. She said German Shepherd. Ranger lifted his head as if he understood. The hydraulic spreader pressed again. This time, the upper corner of the door shifted enough for Daniel to see the bent frame. Before the rescuers could continue, a deep metallic sound rolled across the ceiling above them. Dust drifted down from a light fixture. Everyone froze. Laura raised one hand. Stop the tool. Another low creak passed through the corridor. Snow had been collecting on the roof for hours, and the weight was beginning to strain the structure above the main hallway. Laura spoke into her radio. All teams, suspend movement through the central corridor. We may have overhead instability. Daniel looked toward the narrow maintenance passage Ranger had used. It ran behind the library wall and continued toward the cafeteria wing. Too tight for an adult to crawl through, but perhaps it connected to a wider utility corridor beyond the bend. He turned to Ranger. The dog was still keeping Emily warm. Daniel did not need him to search yet. He needed him exactly where he was. Caleb noticed Daniel studying the passage. There is another way out, the boy said. Ranger found it. Daniel looked at Aaron's tag resting against Caleb's coat. Then we are going to find it too. Daniel moved to the maintenance panel and aimed his flashlight into the narrow passage. The opening was barely 3 feet high, lined with pipes, insulation, and electrical conduits. Ranger had crossed it easily, but no adult could carry a child through without risking injury. Daniel studied the building map mounted beside the fire door. The service passage continued for nearly 40 feet before joining a wider utility corridor behind the cafeteria. If they could reach that corridor from the opposite side, the children could be moved safely without using the strained central hallway. Chief Hayes traced the route with one gloved finger. The cafeteria entrance is on the east side. Snow has blocked the exterior doors, but the second team can clear them. Daniel keyed his radio. East team, locate the cafeteria service entrance. Clear snow from the doors and check the utility corridor for structural damage. Report before entry. A voice answered through static. Copy. Moving now. Another metallic creak traveled overhead, followed by a soft fall of dust. Hannah gathered the children farther from the wall, while Caleb kept the thermal packs arranged beneath their blankets. Emily remained close to Ranger, her small hand buried in the thick fur at his shoulder. Her eyes followed Daniel through the narrow gap. Is the dog leaving? She asked. Not until you do, Daniel replied. Ranger raised his head at the sound of Daniel's voice, but stayed beside her. The portable heater pushed warm air through the opening, and color had begun to return to Emily's face. Daniel removed his outer rescue jacket and passed it through the gap. Caleb caught it and wrapped it around the smallest boy. You will need that, Hannah said. I have another layer, Daniel answered. The truth was simpler. The children needed every piece of warmth the rescuers could spare. A radio call arrived from the East team. Cafeteria entrance located. Doors are blocked by approximately 4 feet of packed snow. We are clearing now. No visible damage to the exterior wall. Laura looked toward Daniel. We need 10 minutes. Then we use every one of them. Daniel asked Hannah to count the children again. 5 voices answered, some louder than others. Caleb spoke last. His voice was steady. Daniel asked each child for a name, age, and favorite place in the school. The questions kept them alert and gave the room something other than fear to hold. One child loved the art room. Another loved the gym. Emily whispered that she liked the library because Ranger listened when she read aloud. The German shepherd rested his chin across her blanket as if proving the point. Daniel looked at Caleb through the gap. How did Ranger get out? Caleb pointed toward the service panel inside the room. There is a loose cover behind the bookcase. He kept scratching at it after the heater stopped. Did you send him? Caleb nodded. My dad taught me the command. Daniel felt Aaron's name enter the silence before the boy said it. I put my library card under Ranger's collar and told him to find a Marine. Daniel looked down at the faded red rescue collar visible beside Emily's shoulder. Ranger had crossed the freezing passage, found an exterior vent, circled the building, and waited at the front door until the right person arrived. Not the nearest person, the right one. The East team called again. Cafeteria doors are clear. Utility corridor is open and stable. We can reach the library service wall from this side. Chief Hayes lifted the hydraulic tool. We have our route. Daniel met Caleb's eyes through the narrow opening. Your father taught Ranger how to find help. Caleb touched the dog tag at his neck. He taught him how to find you. Chief Hayes divided the team without raising her voice. 2 rescuers moved through the cafeteria utility corridor with soft stretchers, thermal blankets, and portable lights. Daniel remained at the library door, listening to each update through his radio, while Ranger stayed pressed against Emily's side. The German shepherd's breathing was slow and steady now, his body forming a warm wall between the child and the cold floor. The East team is at the service wall, Laura said. They found the access panel behind the storage shelves. We can open a route large enough for one child at a time. Daniel turned toward Hannah. We are moving the youngest and coldest first. You will go with them. Hannah shook her head. The children go before me. You are responsible for keeping them calm on the other side, Daniel replied. They need a familiar face waiting. She looked at the 5 children, then nodded. The team opened the service wall carefully, removing a section of paneling without sending debris into the reading room. Warm light appeared through the new opening. It was not wide, but it was safe. Daniel passed instructions through the fire door while rescuers entered from the utility corridor. Emily was placed on a soft stretcher with blankets beneath and above her. Ranger stood when they lifted her. The girl reached for him. He comes too, she whispered. Daniel looked at Laura. Let him walk beside the stretcher. Ranger moved into the passage with one rescuer holding his harness. He never took his eyes from Emily. The corridor was narrow and smelled of dust, warm plastic, and old pipes. Portable lights cast long shadows across the concrete walls. Every few feet, the team stopped to check the path and the child's breathing. Daniel followed through the new opening once the route was confirmed. When Emily reached the cafeteria, heated air from the rescue unit met them. She opened her eyes wider and touched Ranger's ear. You stayed, she said. The dog lowered his head against her blanket. One by one, the other children followed. A 7-year-old boy carried a paper snowflake from the classroom wall. Another child held the hearing aid Daniel had found in the hallway. Hannah walked beside each stretcher until the team reached the cafeteria doors, where emergency workers waited with warm coats and medical bags. Caleb refused to leave early. He stood near the library wall with Daniel's yellow rescue jacket wrapped around his shoulders. Aaron's dog tag rested against the zipper. "The smaller kids first," he said. Daniel recognized the tone. Aaron had used the same words during difficult searches. No one gets left behind. Ranger returned through the corridor after every child, moving from the cafeteria back to the library as though counting them himself. His paws were cold, and snow still clung to the fur beneath his chest, but he did not stop. When only Caleb and Daniel remained, another deep creak traveled through the building. The ceiling lights trembled. Chief Hayes spoke through the radio. "We need the last two out now." Caleb looked toward the dark hallway beyond the jammed fire door. "My dad said you always came back." Daniel removed Aaron's tag gently from the boy's coat and closed Caleb's hand around it. "Then we will prove him right." Ranger stepped into the utility corridor first. Caleb followed with one hand on the dog's harness and Daniel close behind. They moved beneath the pipes, past the exposed insulation, and toward the warm light of the cafeteria. At the final turn, Caleb stopped. "What about Ranger?" Daniel placed a hand on the German shepherd's back. "No child walks out alone," he said. "Neither does the dog who found them." The three of them crossed the cafeteria doors together as snow blew across the parking lot. Outside, rescue workers wrapped Caleb in a thermal blanket. Ranger stood beside him, exhausted but alert, while Daniel looked back at the school. 5 children and 1 teacher were safe because a K-9 had trusted memory more than a computer record, and because one boy had known exactly whom to ask him to find. Inside the heated medical unit, the storm became a distant sound against the metal walls. Emily rested beneath layers of warm blankets while a paramedic checked her temperature and breathing. Ranger lay on the floor beside the stretcher, his faded red collar still damp, his sable coat beginning to dry beneath a thermal cover. Every time Emily opened her eyes, the German shepherd lifted his head. Every time she closed them again, he remained close enough for her fingers to touch his fur. Caleb sat across from them with Daniel's yellow rescue jacket wrapped around his shoulders. Aaron's dog tag rested in his palm. Daniel stood near the rear doors, watching the child and the dog in silence. Chief Laura Hayes entered after confirming that Hannah and the other 4 children were stable. "The school district is accounting for every student now," she said. "No one is missing." Daniel looked toward Caleb. "One system said the same thing hours ago." Laura followed his gaze. This time, people checked. She stepped out to coordinate transportation, leaving Daniel with the boy he had avoided for 5 years. Caleb studied the dog tag before speaking. "My dad said Ranger knew 2 commands for finding people." Daniel moved to the bench beside him. "I remember one. Find help," Caleb said. That meant he could go to anyone. A teacher, a firefighter, a neighbor. Ranger's ears shifted at the familiar words, but he did not leave Emily's side. Caleb turned the tag over. The other command was different. Daniel already knew what the boy would say, yet hearing it still felt like a door opening inside a room he had kept locked. "Find a Marine." Caleb nodded. Dad said Ranger should only use that when someone needed a person he trusted completely. Daniel looked through the small rear window at the dark school. Rescue lights moved across the snow, turning it red, then white, then red again. "There were closer people than me," he said. "Houses near the South Road. County workers near the gym entrance." Ranger was not looking for the closest person. Caleb's voice remained quiet. "He was looking for you." Daniel felt the old answer rise inside him. Training, scent, memory, chance, all reasonable things. All safer than believing Aaron had trusted him beyond the years of silence. "How would he know I was here?" Daniel asked. Caleb looked toward Ranger. "Mom brought him past the rescue garage last month. Ranger saw you outside. He pulled toward the truck, but you went inside before we could stop." Daniel remembered the afternoon. A German shepherd had barked once from a passing vehicle. He had turned away without looking closely. Tonight, when the heater stopped, Ranger kept going to the maintenance panel. Caleb continued. "He knew there was a way out. I put my library card under his collar and told him to find a Marine. I did not know whether he would find you. I just knew Dad said he could." Daniel lowered his eyes to Aaron's tag. "Your father trusted me once." "He still did," Caleb replied. He wrote it down. Daniel looked at him. Caleb reached into the inner pocket of his coat and removed a small plastic sleeve. Inside was a folded letter, protected from snow and moisture. Daniel's name appeared across the front in Aaron's handwriting. Mom said I should give this to you when you were ready. Daniel did not take it immediately. Ranger stood, crossed the narrow space, and placed his head beneath Daniel's hand. The dog's fur was still cold near the ears, but life had returned to his eyes. Daniel rested his palm against the German shepherd's head. 5 years of distance had not erased the dog's memory. It had only made the journey longer. Daniel accepted the letter. Outside, the school doors stood open beneath the falling snow, and for the first time that night, no one was waiting behind them. 3 weeks later, sunlight rested on the snowbanks outside North Ridge Elementary, and water ran in narrow silver lines along the edge of the parking lot. The storm had passed, but its memory remained in the repaired roof, the new emergency lights, and the bright red manual alarm installed inside the lower library. Daniel had helped mount it at a height every child could reach. He had also replaced the warped fire door, inspected the maintenance corridor, and stayed long after the county workers left, testing each latch until he trusted it. The school reopened on a quiet Monday morning. Parents gathered near the entrance while teachers welcomed students beneath paper banners made in the art room. There were no speeches from Daniel. He stood near the side wall in a clean olive jacket, uncomfortable with the attention and grateful when Ranger moved beside him. The German shepherd's sable coat had regained its shine. His paws were fully healed, and the faded red rescue collar still circled his neck. Emily arrived holding her mother's hand. When she saw Ranger, she let go and crossed the hallway carefully. The dog lowered himself so she could wrap both arms around his shoulders. I practiced reading, she told him. Ranger's tail moved once across the floor. Caleb came through the entrance carrying a small wooden box. Aaron's dog tag hung over his sweater. Daniel had opened the letter 2 nights after the rescue, alone at his kitchen table while snow slid from the roof outside. Aaron had not written about blame. He had written about trust. He reminded Daniel that surviving was not a debt and that friendship did not end when one Marine failed to return home. The final line had stayed with Daniel every morning since. Take care of the people I love, but let them take care of you too. Caleb stopped in front of him and offered the box. Inside was the old photograph Daniel had once kept face down in his glove compartment. Aaron stood beside Ranger, smiling beneath falling snow. Daniel stood on the other side, younger and unguarded. Beneath the photograph, Caleb had placed a new picture taken outside the rescue unit on the night of the storm. Daniel, Ranger, Caleb, Hannah, and the 5 children stood together beneath emergency lights. No one had been left out of the frame. Mom said this one belongs with you, Caleb said. Daniel closed the box carefully. Then I will keep it where I can see it. The children gathered near the library door for a short safety demonstration. Chief Laura Hayes showed them the new alarm, while Hannah explained that every name would now be checked by a person before the building was marked clear. Daniel watched Ranger walk toward the doorway where his frozen paws had once scratched for help. This time, the glass opened easily. Caleb held it wide. Ranger paused at the threshold and looked back at Daniel. 5 years earlier, Daniel had walked away from a family because grief convinced him that absence would hurt less than love. The dog had crossed that distance without accusation. He had simply returned, carrying a child's name and the faith of a man who was gone. Daniel stepped forward and placed one hand on Caleb's shoulder. Together, they followed Ranger inside. Behind them, snow began to slide from the school roof in soft white sheets. Ahead, children laughed in the warm hallway. The door closed gently, but it did not lock. Not anymore.